So I would like to ask everybody to take its seat. We will continue with the second panel. Please take your seat. So we will get going for our second panel. That will be a CSA update and opportunities. And the panelists are the Director General. So let me first introduce them. So on your left is Jean-Claude Piedboeuf, is the Director General for Space Science and Technology. Jean-Claude has been with the CSA since 1996. Then is Eric Laliberté, the Director General for Space Utilization. Eric has been with CSA since 2001. Then comes Gilles, which is the Director General for Space Exploration. That has been with the CSA since '89, so I guess the and finally, before CSA. Finally, Mary Preville, who is the Director General for Policy, that has joined more recently in 2016. So I think we will go with presentations one by one. So I will ask Jean-Claude to come first to the presentation.
Thank you. And merci beaucoup donc pour cette opportunité pour présenter les programmes de l'agence. So we'll start with Space Science and Technology, and I will start with a slightly different approach as what I have done 2 years ago. So just move on. So the first thing, I will go back to the new, what we call the Departmental Result Framework, or what we call DERF, and it's basically what CSA is doing and how we report to the Parliament. And so it's interesting because we were asking why we do things, and it's really about the result we are trying to achieve. And you can see we want to develop space research, advanced technology, so we want to increase the birth in industry, increase the publication in university. We want to have more Canadians engaged with space. So more people engaged, a new organization, more utilization of the social media. Obviously, space information and technology should improve the life of Canadians. And so how many services they are using, what kind of spin-off we do with our science and technology. And then Canadian investment in space benefit the economy. That's a key factor. So we create HQP, and Canada's space sector has been a strong export. So this is really interesting to start from that perspective. And then the next one is really under this program, and this is in place since the April 1st, so it's relatively recent. We have 4 programs through which we deliver the result for Canadians. Space exploration, that Gilles will talk about, is really looking into space. Space utilization is looking to our Earth and what space could do on Earth, and this will be discussed by Eric. I will talk about space capacity development. And then we have all the internal services at CSA that support all the activity, HR, finance, IT, and Mary will talk about the policy aspect of that. So on the space capacity development, it's really that I will develop a bit more. We want to build the foundation for the space sector. So in space, we have the upstream, so we are sending stuff in space. It's important also to work on the ground segment, so what we need to control the stuff in space. And also, there is a lot of data. So the downstream, how we process the data. And so these are the 3 segments that we need to take into account when we are building the capacity. The 3 are really critical. So the goal of space capacity development is strengthen the existing company, but support also the emergence of new one. Space economy is growing, and that's why we need to build the capacity. So this slide is really summarizing what is the Space Capacity Development Program at CSA. It's 7 integrated initiatives. And so you can see we go from inspiration and idea, we mature that through the program, and when we position the space sector to capture global opportunity. This is really, and you will see on the bottom of the slide, we want to offer an end-to-end experience to further space innovation. The goal is really to go from the idea, and innovation is when you use something. It's not just when you publish a paper, it's really when the idea is becoming something that is used by many. And it's interesting also if you think this is the value proposition we provide to the space sector. We have the CSA resource, we have a strong value proposition, and the space sector is the customer that will deliver the result for Canadian. And we want to have a strong value proposition for them. So as I said before, we position the space sector for global opportunity. And we start with the young people. I will not try to pronounce it out because I always misspell it. But we start with the young, the kids, and we inspire them, and we inspire them to go to the STEM. Then the Stadia program is initiative, I will say, is really focusing on academia. This is where you develop the first idea, where you develop the idea in space science, where you have the experts that are growing. SCDP is a well-known program, has been there for many times. We develop the technology, like the readiness of the technology to go to space, but also to support the ground segment. And it's part also, like we mentioned this morning, Innovation Solution Canada. This is part of the SCDP program, and we have a challenge this year, which is about AI. Then we have our application development. It's also addressing the technology. This is done by my colleague Eric here, but it's part of the Space Capacity Development Program. It's really how can we use better the data, and how can we have a growing space sector and industry that will use the space data. Our ESA program, we have access to the European Space Agency since 40 years. And this is very important. It's opened the market, the European market, for the space industry in Canada. We have the ARTES, which is addressing communication. We are part of the EU program, the exploration program. We are going to be we are already part of the ExoMars mission, and we will be part of the next one. We participate to technology development, and a few of you are part of these initiatives. But we also have access to education program when we are talking about STEM, and the incubator, like the big program of ESA. So, and one thing that was mentioned also, so partnership like ESA is a strong partnership for CSA. We have been there, and when we are talking about international partnership, this is a very good example. Then we move to the expertise and facility. CSA, there is a strong pool of expertise that is used by the space sector in general, that we collaborate with other government departments, but we work also with university, industry, and within the government, this is something we are trying to do more and more, working with the partner, and CSA has been good in doing that. We have also good lab. You all know probably the David Florida lab in Ottawa area, which has been there since the 1970s. And basically, almost all the Canadian spacecraft has been tested in this lab. But we have also some lab in Saint-Hubert. We have the Mars Yard that we call, and we have a base in Timmins where we launch balloon. And we have the capability demonstration. It's a new initiative that we put a few years ago. That's where we really take the idea and we try to demonstrate that first on ground with the rover. We can use aircraft, we can use balloon, sounding rocket, but we also can use the CubeSat or basically microsat to demonstrate. It has been shown that it's very important to be able to demonstrate your technology or your science or your new approaches in space. So the next slide, it's, I say, back to result. Think about result, and I would say help us to help you. Okay, we are reporting on result. We have our activity, which are the 7 initiatives. From that, we generate output. We offer to the space sector opportunity to advance science and technology, to create the next generation of experts, to basically involve kids in space. But then we measure the outcome. In terms of really the direct outcome that we want to measure, we want to advance, obviously, the space, the science and technology readiness. We want to fly in space at some point. We need to develop the HQP. We heard that a big issue in the future will be the lack of experts. And if you are already involved in AI, you will see it's very difficult to hire the expert in this field. And we want to increase the STEM. So we are using our program to help the government to reach this objective. Then in terms of intermediate outcome, again, we want to fly. We need to increase the mission readiness. Space is still a difficult environment, and you cannot launch everything. And we want to increase the competitiveness of the space sector, both on the industry and academia side. When we say we want to position the space sector for global opportunity, it's really to help the space sector to be able to compete, to be the best in science and to be the best in technology, and also meet the workforce need. So here I will describe, there is one, the one slide missing. It's on my, okay, interesting, there is a, I can show one or the other. Okay, so this is the activity plan in the space science and technology for 18-19. So the first one is just is to talk about SCDP. So SCDP, you know, we have our contribution part, which it's really there to help the competitiveness of the space sector. Very successful program that we receive a lot of contributions. So we are going to issue another AO, and we have our contract part, which is really to support the future need of the government mission. And so we are also going to work on that. And we are always improving our approach, so there will be discussion with the space sector. And by the way, as mentioned, the Innovation Solution Canada is part of SCDP program. This is where it's funded. And we are going to issue our first series of contracts to respond to the challenge. Then I try to get the other one. Then the Stadia program, which is supporting the academia. We have the known by university, the FAST program that is offering opportunity to test science and technology and grow the student in an hands-on experience. And also we are supporting the participation of students in conference. For example, the CSA is part of the International Space Education Board, and we are sending every year 10 students to attend to IASC and to basically be able to connect with other space agencies, space industry, and colleagues in other countries. Then we have the ESA program. This year is an important year. We are renewing our agreement, and in which is coming at the end in 2019. So this summer we are meeting with our ESA colleagues to renegotiate the agreement. And this is a very important process. There is a consultation with the space sector to make sure that we basically develop the best agreement for Canada. And this will be done through this year and next. And to prepare also for the ministerial event where it's all, basically ESA is, the minister are meeting every 3 years to set up the budget. And the next one is in December 2019. And the last one on this side has been mentioned by Sylvain this morning, CubeSat. Basically, it was a new approach, and it's really the spirit of the Space Capacity Development Program. In the CubeSat program, we say, okay, we want to demonstrate something in space, so we are the element of the demonstration. We want to involve university and students, so we have the Stadia part and the STEM. and there will be also kids, like basically a primary and high school student working on or participating on CubeSat. And we are involving our experts. So our expert at CSA will help the team to make sure, especially the university that are never been involved in building a CubeSat, will need a bit more help. And so we are going to provide webinar, seminar, and do some technical review to make sure, and we are providing the launch from the space station to make sure that they will be able to launch. So then, okay. Next slide. We have an Eng2 program and training program. When we say we want to basically build the next generation of HQP, we do it also at CSA. We launched our new Eng2 basically call last year, and we are hiring now the new Eng2. By the way, we received more than 800 applications for 5 positions, so it's a very popular program. It's not as popular as Gilles astronaut program, but it's close, one fifth of that. But it's very interesting to see the interest of the young, in this case, engineer for the space program. And we have a similar program on the technician side, technologists, to train them on AIT, which is also a very specific or specialized field. Then we have the Stratos program, Stratos Science that will take place this summer in Timmins. It's a collaboration with CNES. We are launching a series of balloons with Canadian experiment. There will be experiment coming from SCDP PAS program, from Stadia. We are going also to fly some experiment from high school student, and this will be also a great opportunity. So it's also a well-integrated initiative. So it's part of the space capacity development. LEAD, we are supporting some science, like planetary science, for exploration. But we took that opportunity of having a rover, and we have a series of rover at CSA, to offer opportunity to university, to bring students, to bring their own science technology payload. We offer some opportunity to the industry to integrate some new technology they want to test, and our expert will help to integrate everything, and so we can have a successful mission. This one, there is a potential also for a collaboration with the European Space Agency, because they have a strong interest for moon exploration. And this will be like a real moon mission on Earth. So we are really using the same approach as a real moon mission, and there is a great opportunity. Expert is where we provide our technical services in terms of engineering, science, the technician for the test, but also IP. We provide support for IP both at CSA, but also for the industry. We have a series of labs, as I mentioned, at DFL and within CSA. And the last one on this slide is KeySat. It's the quantum encryption demonstration, basically to demonstrate that we can distribute quantum key from space. And this is very important in terms of security, because with quantum computing, the current security will be easily breakable. And so we are already developing the next generation. This is done in partnership with the university. A good example of an evolution from the idea to the demonstration. This is started with some concept study. We work with university. There was some involvement of Stadia. It was developed a bit through the SCDP also. There is some work we do with ESA on that, and now we are at the demonstration side, and we are working with a government partner also on this. So again, we are integrating everything in this, and we are also trying, it's a demonstration, so we are trying a new approach, basically be less prescriptive on the requirement and give a bit more freedom to the industry and offer also some opportunity to fly their own payload. So we talk about new space. So new space is about challenging existing process or existing approach. So it's about change. And I don't think, and sometimes people ask, okay, when is change going to stop and when are we going to be stable? And someone told me, don't hope to be stable. What you need to adapt is the continuous change. And so we are adopting this approach of continuous improvement in the Space Capacity Development Program. We have the chance that every initiative there is a quite short lifetime. Basically, it's 1 to 3 years from the idea, or basically when you issue something like CubeSat and you launch it, it's not long. So we have the opportunity to take the lessons learned and to consult, to do the analysis, validate our result, and implement that, and then we continue that. So we are not going to do revolution, but we really want to talk to the space sector and make sure that we address the need. Okay, the goal is to build the space capacity in the space sector, not within CSA. So we need really to talk with you. And my last slide is really how we are going to talk with you. We are going to have a consultation committee that will involve the key player of the industry, university, and other government department. We want representatives from the different field of space. And under that, there will be some working group that will work on specific issue, like we already started on technology trend. It's important to know what are the technology trend in space. For example, you know that constellation is becoming more and more in reality. This has an impact on big satellite, geo-satellite communication. So this is something we have to take into account to be able to position the space sector for the next generation. The same AI, it's something that is there. It was interesting to hear Mike, and I visited the MDA last week, and to see this robotic line. And the robotic line is just one aspect, but it's how AI now is being involved in the production of antenna. If you will have think 10 years ago that you will see robot and AI helping in building antenna and for a space application, it will have been very surprising. And so this is something that will be established soon, and we are planning the first contestation end of the summer and beginning of the fall. And to conclude, this is my last presentation as Director General of Space Science and Technology. Next week, I will start as the CSA CFO, and Marie-Claude, which is here, will replace me as the DG of Space Science and Technology. So I will invite you to take the chance that she is here to meet her, and she will be the next, in 2 years, she will make this presentation. Thank you.
Well, congratulations, Marie-Claude. And thank you, Jean-Claude, for setting the stage and also giving us a good overview of the activities of what we call the new programs, basically under the new reporting structure, so the Space Capability Development Program. I will go into the Space Utilization Program, and just a reminder of the mandate and strategic objectives of this program is basically, in a few words, it's making sure that space-based data can contribute to the production of information products, services that support and inform policy and decision-making, that connects Canada and Canadians, understanding the Earth as well. As we've heard this morning, Kaylee that was talking about the science aspect and the importance of understanding Earth and its immediate environment. And of course, support in its delivery. This program has also to support the government plans to foster innovation, science, and international collaboration, subjects that were of the previous panel. Now, one thing, you're all sitting here listening to this presentation, so I can afford to do a commercial. I'm told by by our Director of Communication that whenever we start talking about satellites, interest goes down. Maybe not in this room, okay? If you're all here and we're all going to talk about space for 3 days, It's probably not pertinent to this room, but I am asking you to be ambassadors, that when we talk about satellites, it's not the satellite itself to the general public that is important, but what we do with it. Why are we sending satellites up in orbit? Why are we doing this? Well, it's to touch things like climate change, disaster management, Arctic, health. Yes, even health. If you're not aware, we do work a lot more with Public Health Agency of Canada in looking at these priorities and how Earth observation, so space-based Earth observation, can help in those areas. So you have to be ambassadors to communicate that it's not necessarily the technology that should be appealing to every Canadian. It should be what we do with it, what we get out of it. So how it benefits Canadians. End of commercial. And thank you for taking the challenge. So if that's probably a slide you've seen before. If you heard me talk in a couple, and yesterday I was using this slide again. So we basically look at the utilization of space in 4 different categories: communications, navigations, Earth observation, I just talked a little bit about, and it's the heart of this program, but also monitoring space environment, so space weather. And yesterday there was a good working group, a workshop specifically on space resiliency, and we touched a lot on space weather and space debris. And it is that my time, or? So yes, departments and different organizations are coming together in Canada to tackle, this important aspect. It's taking more and more importance in terms of space weather and what can be the impacts of that on the ground and to all the satellites that we put up there. So we have to understand it. So that was the subject of yesterday's workshop. I want to stress one thing, because Jean-Claude stressed the fact that we're all integrated. Although we're presenting 3 programs, and I am basically representing the Space Utilization Program, there's collaborations within CSA, and we're touching on all of these. For example, in communication, the majority of the investments are in technology development. So this is the way that we collaborate together internally in the different fields here. So first activity that I want to stress is the launch of RadarSat Constellation mission. So RCM will be launched, and let me just check my countdown. Gennady, how many days? 176 days before launch, okay? So Gennady keeps a tally of every day.
Interest just went up now that you're talking about satellites.
In this crowd, yes, I was expecting that. But it is definitely the subject of a lot of attention at CSA. And again, not just my branch, but everybody at CSA that is contributing to these. And we are preparing for operations and also the commissioning, along with our industrial partners, preparing to commission that constellation that will ensure continuity of SAR imagery. And if you want, during those 3 days, I just mentioned Gennady, who's right there. There's Steve Iris that's sitting there, and Jill Smith there. So if you cross path, and you can feel free to ask questions about this, the constellation and its capabilities. Now, the other mission that we have in the implementation phase is SWOT. It's the Surface, Water, and Ocean Topography. So that's an international mission that is led by NASA, that involves also CNES, our partners, and we are providing instrumentation that goes on this. So we are planning to continue the testing of those instruments for the Canadian contribution to this mission. What we will continue to do is explore new concepts in technology areas such as space radar and space optics. I'd like to mention there's a couple of mission concepts that we are We are finalizing, we are continuing our options analysis, but working with Environment and Climate Change Canada on their priority for environment. Basically, there's a mission that's looking at air quality, so greenhouse gas, and there's another one that's looking at the quantity of snow that, measuring it from space and having a better understanding of how much we have, and that plays into the water management activities that they have. So those are two of their priorities, and we continue working, looking at options and how can space contribute to the best of its ability. We also foster new discoveries in the fields of solar terrestrial science and Earth system sciences. I'll touch a little bit on that, but basically these are looking at grants that we continue to support in terms of science data analysis. So looking not just at the mission that we have sent in space, but also missions from our partners. So operations of ongoing missions, you've heard most of the slide was touched this morning by Kaylee. I think the right-hand side, Osiris on Odin, is an instrument, it's a Canadian instrument on an international mission. So we continue to operate this, to support the operation of this instrument, looking at the science data and the science outputs of that. MOPIT is another instrument that was mentioned this morning. Bottom left corner is SciSat. That was also mentioned, and I have a slide just using that as an example of a successful mission. But basically all these, and if I go to the top right, you have M3MSat and NeoSat that are missions that are continuing. We will continue to use RadarSat-2 and make the transition between RadarSat-2 and RCM for the government mandates. And the other image that's not a satellite, it's actually the Geospatial Observatory for Canada. It's basically ground, but looking at space, so understanding space from the ground. When we're looking at all these missions and instruments, SciSat celebrated last year 14 years. It's going to celebrate in August 15 years of operation. We have to look at, what is the future? We have to look at the sustainability, the long-term sustainability, and we have to, analyze where, we continue to operate, what the value is. So every time that we look for extending those missions, we go through a process that is analyzing, the value, the data, and also the impact to the overall investment portfolio. So these are continuously looked at in terms of their continuity, their value to the community, and value I'm not only meaning in terms of science data continuity, but there's also value in having those systems continue to operate. So the technology also we learn from that. So I wanted to talk about the SciSat success. Like those numbers that you see are they just keep increasing, okay? So like I said, in August, we will be celebrating 15 years of SciSat. Basically for a mission that was planned for 2 years of operations. So it is testimony to Canadian technology, to instrumentation. We were talking yesterday about resilience. Well, that's a proof that there is the capability to construct and live and operate a satellite for a number of years. And when I mentioned that it's important to continue, the 15 years, if I'm not mistaken, Jacques, you might want to correct me there, but 15 years is a threshold that is looked at when you're thinking in terms of technology that goes to GEO. So now you're looking at a LEO satellite that's operated technology in a harsh environment for 15 years. You can make the case for GEO, and I think that was another subject or another mention of the trends that we're looking at GEO satellites in order to have a different way of looking at Earth. So enough of that, and I want to go into the different programs that we have in terms of data utilization and applications. So you're probably familiar, at least for one of those, maybe all three of the GRIP, EOAD, and SOAR. They each cater to a different community, basically GRIP to the government departments, EOAD to industry, and SOAR to the academic environment. Now, these have been delivering great results, but that doesn't mean we should not ask ourselves, is there a better way to deliver on those programs and basically to obtain and even improve the results? So that's why I stole one of the slide from Jean-Claude and I put it in the mixing up. I'm figuring out I'm mixing up my left and right. In the right bottom corner, so I stole this diagram that basically I agree. We have to look at continuous improvement and we have to look at renewing those programs to make sure that we continue to deliver great results in terms of data utilization and applications. The other two diagrams that I have here, the other two pictures, are there to point to the data analysis initiatives that we have in science. So it's a couple of years back, we've changed the approach, going from a mission-specific support to a broader support, and basically looking at, best proposals in terms of looking at other sources of data, not just the Canadian sources, but also integrating partners and other international sources to get the best science for the investment. So, without further ado, I'll hand over the microphone to Gilles Leclerc, my colleague.
Merci Eric. Merci à CASI pour nous avoir invités, les directeurs généraux de l'Agence spatiale canadienne. This is the second time, so I guess it has become a tradition. I hope we continue the tradition. So I'm going to be covering briefly the programs that we've undertaken at the Canadian Space Agency for space exploration. And so that all the satellite guys don't feel bad, and I'm one of them. I used to be one of them. Astronauts become satellites. Think about it. So the mandate, our objective is essentially to ensure that Canada plays a key role in space exploration. Space exploration at the Canadian Space Agency covers space-based astronomy, planetary science, and human spaceflight. And we do all those things for industry, for science. So we're not doing these things for just so that we inspire Canadians, although inspiring Canadians is important. It's an important element with the astronaut program. But to inspire, you need to do big things and bold things, and we're not going to be shy about it, even though we're modest, humble Canadians. I'm going to cover the programs of space exploration in three elements, three main destinations: the International Space Station, how we prepare for deep space exploration, and then thirdly, I'll cover space astronomy and planetary science. So the ISS has been occupied now for 18 years. Our robotics have been in operation for almost 17 years. It continues to be a unique outpost. It's one of humanity's enduring marvels, and we are using it for science. I will let you read in detail all the things we plan on doing just in 1819, not only supporting operations on the station, helping in the arrival of cargo ships, and soon, probably within a year and a half, crew vehicles to the ISS. All the maintenance of the ISS. The ISS could not operate without Canadian robotics. And we've been busier than ever. The system is getting old, but it's aging gracefully. Just 3 months ago, we replaced the latching end effector. It went without a hitch, and it proves that the technology that was developed more than 20 years ago is extremely sound. Our focus on using the International Space Station for science are life sciences. So we want to learn how humans can adapt to space. What are the methods, the countermeasures that can be adopted so that we can support human exploration into longer space flights. And we also use the space station as a platform for technology development and improving the robotics technology, the navigation technology, the vision systems that have made Canada famous as a world leader in these domains. And even though, I mean, the technology of the Canadarm itself is kind of getting old, we are still learning a lot. We are developing knowledge, operational knowledge that is unique with our team, both at the C headquarters and in Houston. Obviously, the most visible aspect of the International Space Station is whenever we fly an astronaut, and this year will mark the launch, as was mentioned before, of David Saint-Jacques in December. So we will have a famous satellite in orbit. There's a heavy program of science that's been prepared for David. David will also experiment with brand new technology, the Life Science Research System. It's a bioanalysis and biomonitoring system, which we hope over time will find its way into the healthcare system. So all the things we do on Space Station are done with, first of all, making good on our obligations as an international partner in maintaining the station, and also developing the science that will bring benefits to Canadians. We are preparing, along with our international partners, in fact, we've been working on the architecture for a deep space gateway for more than 4 years now. So the architecture is quite mature to the point where NASA, and you've probably seen it in the last weeks, have clearly announced their intention to returning to the moon and to essentially putting in place all the technologies, the systems, and even launching RFPs, RFIs, to launch the first element of that deep space platform gateway by 2022. And along with the ISS partners, and that partnership will be open not only to other countries, but also to the private sector, NASA wants to pursue commercialization and expand the economic sphere beyond low Earth orbit, and now into the lunar vicinity, and eventually, and pretty soon, if you believe the very aggressive agenda that NASA has, by the mid-2020s, landing not only science experiments, but rovers, ISRU, and so on. So it's really, we've been talking for many years about being at the crossroads in space exploration. We are really there, and it's up to us to not only catch up, but in some areas to lead. This essentially is in detail NASA's latest plans for their lunar exploration campaigns, and it starts from the basics. I mean, continuing the analysis of lunar rocks. I think there's around 40% of the rocks that were brought back from the Apollo missions that still need to be analyzed. The first thing that NASA wants to do is use private sector companies to land scientific instruments on the moon, then going bigger over time, landing larger landers with human-rated rovers. You see that by the mid-2020s, they're planning to have very heavy rovers on the moon. And then at the bottom, you see the calendar, the schedule for the Deep Space Gateway, the first element of which, the power and propulsion module, will be launched in 2022. And on this element of the Deep Space Gateway, robotic interfaces are required. Space astronomy and planetary exploration. We continue to operate our instrument on Mars, the Alpha Particle X-ray spectrometer. We have OLA, the OSIRIS-REx laser altimeter, which is going to reach asteroid Bennu by August, September this year. So we will see, well, thanks to the laser altimeter, the asteroid. OSIRIS-REx was launched back in September 2016. It's been cruising for a distance of over 1.6 billion kilometers. And we are just about to get ready to do the science around the asteroid, scoop a sample of the asteroid and bring it in 2023. And that's one thing to be said about space exploration and exploration of the solar system. These are generational projects. I mean, we approved those IRIS-REx back in 2010. The James Webb Space Telescope, which is another flagship program for us. I mean, the initial concept studies were in the mid-90s, and Canada joined the program more than 15 years ago now. And it will be launched, touch wood, in 2020. And finally, I mean, we want to keep, even though we know that we've consulted a lot, it's important for us, as Jean-Claude and Eric mentioned, that we keep good communications with the science community because the things we do in exploration are, I mean, let's admit it, ultimately for science. Astronauts perform science on the station. They are subject of experiments themselves. We do space astronomy and planetary exploration for the science. And exploration leads, I mean, it's about discovery. Once you've discovered, you want to essentially use the resources, and it takes us to the next step in exploration, which is utilization and exploitation of extraterrestrial resources. So this is the panorama of the missions we are involved in. I should also mention, but it was covered by Jean-Claude, that we are, as part of our status as a cooperating member of the European Space Agency, we contribute the satellite communication payload on the ExoMars 2016 mission. So the imagery we get from Mars goes through Canadian hardware, and we are involved. When I say we, it's Canada. I mean, it's Canadian industry. In this case, it's Maxar MDA. We are providing the locomotion and the chassis for the ExoMars 2020 rover. And ISS continues to be the single largest program that the agency has ever undertaken, but it's going to be 32 years. So we've invested $2 billion. If you spread it over the duration of the program, I'm not going to say it's small change, but that program has provided Canada with extraordinary visibility, and it's kept us in the club of leading nations in space. And we're now planning the transition from the ISS in its institutional mode into a public-private partnership. NASA have made it clear they now have a transition plan that they want to stop direct funding of ISS by the US government. We'll see exactly what that means, but we are working with our international partners, with NASA, and we will, again, there seek obviously the views of Canadian industry. And last, I'm showing some of the missions that we're looking at. And just so to be clear, if it hasn't been clear yet, space exploration at the CSA is all about missions, whether they are astronauts, hardware, instruments that we provide on international space partners' missions, the science, and so on. It's all about missions for us. The first one on top is the Deep Space Gateway I was referring to earlier. You see a robotic arm. It still doesn't have the Canada logo on it. We will need to commit pretty soon to that partnership. Lunar surface exploration is one area where we have developed expertise over time. There's great potential for us. Third vignette that you see is, and thanks for introducing it, Ewan. This is the Mars sample return. NASA and ESA are partnering. We have an open invitation to participate in what will be one of the most important robotic Martian exploration missions in the coming decade. And finally, not to forget astronomy, you have there CASTOR, which is a Canadian concept for an advanced space astronomy observatory. It's been in the concept phase for too long. We'll need to take a decision on whether or not we embark. So there are opportunities for Canada. It's been said before, there's not much that Canada cannot do in space. It's a matter of leadership, of convincing government to support these missions. And it's not only about government, and it's part of that infamous crossroads. We will move from clearly the traditional, institutional, old space paradigm towards something that's going to look like procuring space exploration services, letting the private sector take the lead completely on missions, and also on science missions. And NASA has set the path. And for example, any interplanetary communication infrastructure is going to be led by the private sector, and NASA are going to buy services for communications to Mars. We are planning also, we got approval for a synthetic aperture radar payload around Mars. That's still on. Is it going to be done in the traditional way, us providing government furnished equipment to NASA? There might be actual money to be made by doing an inventory of water resources on Mars. So just to say that we are engaged, and we will work obviously with you, with our international partners, to define exactly what the next step in human exploration will look like. So thanks for your attention. I will now leave the floor to Mary Preville, Director General Policy.
Merci, Gilles. So I'm different. I don't have cool programs. I don't have cool photos. I have to steal them all from these guys here. But I will try and give you a snapshot of what I do, what my team does. We are not located in Saint-Hubert. We're in the National Capital Region. There's a good reason for that. Right out of the CSA Act is, I guess, the raison d'être for my job, which is assisting the minister in coordinating the government's space policies and programs. A big part of what we do is what we call strategic policy, but really that's Ottawa speak for a lot of paperwork, and I won't talk about that today. But it is the area, I suppose, where I either hinder or help these guys, depending on the situation. But I did want to talk to you a little bit about what we do on economic analysis on an international field, what we're trying to do with some new opportunities, both for industry and business, and the academic community. So just a little snapshot. This is in our work. This is Euroconsult's survey of 2016 information on government expenditures in the space field. So it is very much government. It doesn't include private sector, venture capital, etc. But no surprise, the big bubble, over 50% government expenditures still reside in the United States. Then comes China, Russia, Japan, France. You see Canada just above the small bubble, above the big US bubble. In 2016, the year this one was produced, the data, there were 70 countries participating in space. It's expected to grow to about 80 countries in the next couple of years. So we look at information like that and try and situate Canada in there. So when you look at that little bubble, so the way we try and analyze Canadian information, since 1996, the CSA has been issuing a census-like survey. Hopefully you all respond to it. It is the way we get information on what you are doing. We send this survey to about 200 organizations. In 2016, we received responses back from 150 organizations. Sylvain Laporte tomorrow will give you a bit of a snapshot of some of the information that we have yet to release on 2016 information. We'll probably publish it in about a month's time. Up until 2014, we received information or published just in the upstream side. In 2014, we changed our methodology. We worked with OECD countries to standardize all the methodologies that's used across the country. And so now we report on both upstream and downstream to recognize the changing trends. There's about a quarter of the respondents downstream, 3/4 upstream, and we have about a quarter of the respondents from academia and 3/4 from industry. We will actually be launching the 2017 survey imminently. So again, this is my plug to please respond. Some of the other work that we do on the economic side, we're just going to put out soon a report that provides information on patenting in Canada in the space sector. It's an area we didn't have a good handle on. We hope to publish that in 2018. Now, many of you know the Canadian Space Agency is a portfolio agency under the Minister of Innovation, Science and Economic Development. As Jean-Claude said, we have to think results. We are always trying to quantify and provide results more to government entities, but though when we are often asked, well, what does the money we give you do? So we do a fair number of studies on return on investment. So maybe, again, we rely on you to provide us with a lot of that information and feedback. But basically, we're very comfortable in saying that for every dollar of government contribution to space R&D, we have an additional 2.9% above and beyond the contribution that led to commercialization revenues. Those are actually very powerful figures. One thing from the 2016 survey that I do want to let you in on today, because I think Sylvain will be talking about that, but it's just the space research, the space science that we do. Interesting to note, our space research does take place across the country. That is probably pretty unique for the science. In 2016, total funding to universities from government sources was $107 million. Now, this obviously assumes the assets are in space, which is a much bigger piece. Over the last 5 years, it was the average was a bit lower at less than 100 million. And so we are seeing a bit of a trend upward. 100 million from Canadian sources, 7 million from international sources, US, European Space Agency. So I don't know if it's a surprise to you, but actually NSERC will be the biggest funder at 38 million from the federal government. Then comes CFI, no surprise to the academic community. Then other government departments to us, meaning Department of Defense, Natural Resources Canada at 14 million. CSA on the science side comes in at 100 million. Provincial governments about 10 million. So just moving to international collaboration, space is international, as you all know. Even with a move or the evolving nature to commercial space, or space 2.0, whatever you want to call it, space 4.0, if you listen to the European Space Agency. There's still a lot of agency-to-agency collaboration and work that goes on. That requires a fair bit of engagement on various fronts. Currently, the CSA has 21 active memorandum of understanding or agreements in various areas. The two biggest ones, of course, have been mentioned today by my colleagues, the European Space Agency. That is a treaty-level agreement, so that requires us, when Jean-Claude talks about we're renegotiating with the European Space Agency, which we have to do about every 10 years, it means we have to go back and get the approval from the government every time. When we go to the ministerial meetings of the European Space Agency and we have to pledge what Canada is going to contribute, we have to get Parliament's approval, I shouldn't say, government's approval on that. So as we renegotiate, that really, what we understand to be a very beneficial agreement. There's actually a fair bit of work involved there. The International Space Station, of course, is another you all know about. Gilles has talked to. One area that's really not talked about perhaps all that much in our circles is the United Nations Committee for the Peaceful Uses of Outer Space. UNCOPUS, it's a hard acronym to say. It was established in 1959 to govern the peaceful exploration and use of space for the benefit of all humanity. It's a UN organization. It includes 87 member states. So a couple of years ago, the CSA negotiated with the UN members for a Canadian chair. I believe Dr. David Kendall will be addressing the conference, I think it's tomorrow, in a keynote address. He is our Canadian chair. And we had, it's at a time where there's, the world is changing and the UN organization recognizes this. And so the last couple of years, this is two flagship files. Unispace Plus 50, which will be an upcoming big event in Vienna in June, which will really change the direction of the organization. And the big work as well that has gone on is the guidelines for the long-term sustainability of space. So countries aren't interested in treaties anymore. They're very hard to negotiate, to enforce. The space world is changing so rapidly that treaties couldn't keep up with them anyways. So they're looking more for softer agreements, if you will, norms of behavior, guidelines. And so hopefully in June at the Unispace Plus 50 event, the UN COPUS member states will agree to new guidelines having to do with various regulatory frameworks, safety of space operation, cooperation and capacity building, as well as scientific and technical research. So again, David Kendall will tell you more about that tomorrow in his address. Just over the last year, my group has tried to act a little bit as a matchmaker for, I suppose, starting with industry. We know, as Mike Greenlee said, so the Canadian market isn't big enough for sustaining of a Canadian company. We know that. We're trying to get more opportunities for Canadian companies acting as a matchmaker. So we've had 3 main events in this last year. One, we led a mission to the Space Tech Expo. The Germans have a big interest in collaborating with us. We had over 100 business-to-business meetings there. We also had, we have an agreement with the Sierra Nevada Corporation on the Dream Chaser. We invited them to Canada, had a big event, so 25 business-to-business meetings took place there. They are following up with several organizations, actually. And just recently, again, the Germans wanted to come and see us. We said yes, of course, so we organized another set of meetings there. So we receive fairly good, very positive feedback on those events. So we plan to continue them in 18-19 coming up. We're going to try and do the same thing, perhaps not at the same scale, but at the academic level. There is a new organization called the Milo Institute. It's really being funded by Lockheed Martin through a subsidiary called GeoShare. They basically entrusted Arizona State University to, I will have more international collaboration or pool resources on space missions as the science part. So it's maybe the Space 2.0 business equivalent in the academic field. And so they're interested in talking to Canadian universities, see if they want to take part. We will be organizing information sessions for Canadian universities in the next little while. There will be different levels of, if you want, membership. Buying into a mission, just buying data rights, etc. So it's more of a new way of working in the space science field. Their first mission wants to focus on near Earth object encounters. So again, still somewhat exploratory. Another area that my team is involved in as well is, I suppose it's, trying to help these guys. But as Gilles talked about, humanity going to moon and Mars, there is the question of how are we going to keep those people alive. So I think it pretty much recognized that Canada punches above its weight in space. We have a really good track record, as Gilles has said, on the health and life sciences, our work on the ISS. Our partners know we can deliver. So the last year we undertook an engagement effort with a newish community for us, which is the medical community. And we appointed an expert group to look at what could be Canada's potential contribution to deep space astronaut healthcare. We asked former astronaut Bob Thirst to chair this, also a medical doctor. We asked also retired astronaut Dave Williams, medical doctor, to be part of it. And we got really, Canadian experts in digital health, aging health, chief medical officer for Indigenous communities, remote health experts, medical technologies. And at first they said, I don't know anything about space. Why am I here? This is really cool, but what am I doing? How can I help? So as really Gilles' team and Bob and Dave started talking about, what is going to be needed in deep space, or what the experiences they encountered as astronauts, they all said, oh, wow, that's kind of the same challenges we have here on Earth. So they went off and said, yeah, there's a lot we can do. There's a lot of Canadian advantages we can do. Now, we recognize that this is much longer term. I know there are some saying we're going to send people to Mars in 2030. We know it's not as pressing as some of the other technologies that are needed for deep space. But they were pumped. They saw so many parallels to what is needed for deep space astronaut health as here on Earth. How health care is delivered in the country, how do we monitor, how do we manage it, how do we provide independence to elderly people or people in remote communities, how do we reduce the cost of transporting all the Canadians that live in remote communities or the north to healthcare facilities. How can we help in military settings or disaster responder settings? So there were many parallels that we're seeing. So this is an area we're looking at. It is longer term, but it is certainly one that has a lot of applications on Earth. And that's sort of my conclusion is, I know a very busy slide, but it's the same message that really Eric has said and Gilles. I'm not sure I heard it from Jean-Claude, but maybe that's because he works more on Earth, except for his balloons. He's a little more down to earth. But really is, you know, how do we change the lingo of how do we start talking about, you know, it's not just space. We're all space nerds. It's really cool, and it is cool, but how do we relate to everyday Canadians? So think about your examples. Start talking about your examples. There are many. It's not just from a technological point of view. It's from a science point of view. It's from a humanity point of view. So I won't read the whole slide. These are just examples, more on the technology side. But I leave it to all of us to start talking about how it benefits us here on Earth. Thanks.
Thank you, Mary, and thank you to all the panelists. So we have some time for questions. So I would like to again invite you to come to the microphones if you have questions, and first give your name, and then maybe to whom you address your questions, if it's for a specific Director General.
Hello again, my name is Jacques, I'm a writer. My question is primarily for Gilles, because I was talking with Mary earlier and she said I couldn't ask any questions of her. Gilles, during your presentation you mentioned that we're not yet committed to providing the Canadarm for the Deep Space Gateway. You said there were some domestic considerations. My question is, what sort of process do we have to follow through to get the son or the daughter of the Canadarm on the Deep Space Gateway and any other Canadian technology on it, both from a Canadian perspective and from an international perspective? What process do we have to follow to make this work?
Thanks for the question. This is a perfect question for Mary. This is about the machinery of government. Well, we need, I mean, if you look at the space station program itself, we got approval to continue our partnership in the ISS in budget 2016, so up to the end of 2024. At the same time, government tasked us to provide options for what could be Canada's contribution to the next step in human exploration that is beyond the ISS. It's what we're doing now. We received funding for $18 million, 5 of which will be used to investigate a completely new area. Well, it's not completely new. We've been involved in health, science, medicine, medical care. And we are doing this just now, and we are performing studies on various, some of them more traditional technologies, robotics, rovers, navigation, communications, and medical. But the next step for us is to go back to government and essentially do good on what government has tasked us to do, and we're doing that this fall. And then hopefully a decision will come from government. We're looking at human spaceflight. I think the whole space program needs to be taken care of. But we definitely have for deep space, for a lunar program, we have our homework to do. So government expects us to present options during the coming months. Anything to add, Mary?
Do we have any hoops to jump through with NASA, with the Americans, when we've decided what we want to contribute?
Well, as I said, as part of the ISS partnership, we've been working really hard. I mean, the whole team, hundreds at NASA, a couple of us at CSA, defining the architecture as part of the ISS Exploration Coordination Group study team. That team has presented their findings to the partners of the ISS. You've seen recently that a shift in US space policy towards the moon and towards commercialization. So a large role for the private sector and a large role for international cooperation. These things, I mean, these projects, these policies are starting to take the shape of real programs as we speak. NASA are accelerating the pace on their return to the moon.
Thank you very much.
Mark Boucher from SpaceQ for Jean-Claude. You had mentioned there's a new AO coming from the Space Technology Development Program. Can you tell me what the funding will be for that? Are we going to be, in this current fiscal year, reaching the $20 million level that was outlined in the Emerson report?
Just,
Can you repeat
the question?
Because we were distracted.
Yeah, a bit louder.
The Space Technology Development Program, there's a new AO that's coming, you mentioned that.
Yeah.
What is the funding going to be for that this year? And will it, in this fiscal year, reach the $20 million level that was outlined in the Emerson report?
Yeah, we have been reaching even over reaching, I would say, this 20 million level for the past 2 years at least. So CSA are really been investing in technology development, and so we are planning to respect that limit also in the future. So.
Any thought about going beyond?
When he's CFO, he'll look at it.
Yes.
Hello, my name is Igor Tilizhev. I'm from USF Monitor. My question is about orbital debris. Question is whether Canada is planning to continue to play a big role in space debris mitigation and protection, and the answer is yes. Whether this desire will be implemented in the next SCDP program.
Okay, so if I understood the question correctly, you're asking what we do in terms of space debris, and if we continue doing something, is there a link with the Space Technology Development Program? Is that your question?
Yeah, maybe I will be more specific. So we were quite lucky to get the SCDP project for the space debris protection, the SCDP before the last SCDP. But the last one did not include the space debris protection. That's why I put about the future plans. Whether it's going to be funding issue for the research in this area.
Okay,
like a novel or development of novel shielding for the protection of the Canadian satellites against orbital debris. This is one question.
Yeah, on the technology side, we are working on protection of spacecraft for debris, and this has been ongoing for many years, basically trying to improve the protection for debris. In terms of removing debris, this is it's quite a challenge. Obviously, the big debris could be removed robotically, and CSA has been doing study in the past with the industry about that. So it's possible. We have been working with the European Space Agency also because they have the Envisat satellite. So there is study on the big debris. On the small debris, there is other technology that are developed by other countries, and I think there is some being tested in space right now. It's a significant challenge. Canada is not a big contributor of space debris, but we try to play a role in helping. But
okay, thank you.
Hello, my name is Dale Boucher. I'm the CEO of Deltian Innovations, and my focus is ISRU. This is a follow-up to Chuck's question, and is more of a statement. We recognize, I think, in industry that, first of all, the space sector is on a bit of a starvation diet. I've lost 40 pounds. The Canadian Space Agency's resources are very limited. And Chuck was asking what kind of hoops we have to jump through. And I will tell you that in the past couple of years, I've been talking to both Minister Baines' office and Minister Carr, who is the Minister for Natural Resources Canada, about being involved with ISRU directly as a Canadian strength. And just a slight segue, Canadian mining industry in 2015 contributed $56 billion to the GDP. So it's a strength, but we're not participating. And when I asked these ministers, why not? The question in both cases came back with, you guys don't make enough noise. And I said, what? And the answer, and it came back, you guys do not make space a priority. So, you know, I would challenge the people in this audience a little bit. You know, who knows the phone number of their member of parliament? Show of hands? Interesting. So if we want CSA to improve its resources, to be able to participate, we have to help them. And the way to help them is calling your MP. Call them up and say, what are you doing? Space is important to us. And the more MPs that get into Minister Carr's and Minister Baines' face, the better off we're all going to be collectively.
Okay, any reaction? Yeah, go ahead.
Hi, Chris Konyeshta from Concordia University. I was curious to hear comments on ongoing collaborations and plans for collaborating with NASA, specifically in some of the areas with academia. Things I was thinking about were things like NASA's International Internship Program or coordinated funding for things like FAST on the Canadian side or Flights of Opportunities on the American side, access to NASA data like telemetry from rovers, any of those sorts of aspects, if any of you have comments or responses to that.
I can start on the NASA internship program. We have been working now for 2 years to write. We need to write kind of an agreement, and there is it always seems easy, but there is always a few issues to solve. So we are really working with NASA on that. Initially, it was a pilot project, and so they are extending that to all the NASA center, and so we are part of the discussion. And I mentioned that CSA is and is chairing right now, in effect, the International Space Education Board. So we have really an opportunity to discuss with NASA, and we aim at participating to that program. As for technology and science development, like under FAST and SCDP, typically there is no significant collaboration in the R&D side with other countries, ESA being an exception because we are a member, cooperating member of ESA. So we work we have been working on rover deployment with NASA. We are working on rover deployment with ESA. We have some demonstration mission where we collaborate, but it's always with no exchange of funds. So these opportunities exist, and we continue to, but it's not a formal agreement like the way we have with ESA, but each time we can collaborate. And NASA will not fund the space sector in Canada, and we are not going to fund the space sector in the US in terms of R&D, so it's the same thing. On the data, I will let my colleague.
Well, I think the question was with telemetry from rovers, so that's...
okay, yeah,
so
we have access to that, and we have been doing great collaboration on rover with ESA, NASA, so it's...
Thank you.
Okay.
And just to maybe tag along to the telemetry, yesterday there was a discussion about space resiliency and maybe looking at if there's a way to share the telemetry in terms of space assets that are there. So, for example, SciSat that has been operated for 15 years, what do we learn in terms of the internal system and health? So there's an open question there to see if in some cases it's possible to learn from that. So that's also an area.
Okay, thank you. Maybe a last question on this side.
Yeah, this is a question for Eric Laliberté. Contrary to your colleague, you were focusing mostly on what your achievement for this year and not much on vision for the future. I understand you have a big milestone to deliver this year with RCM, and I am sure you are also thinking about the future. Would you tell us when you plan to present your vision for the future, or in which context?
Well, the vision for the future, what I discussed is, yes, focused on what's coming for in 1819, but in there was also activities looking at future use in terms of the different technologies, so radar and space optics. So there was information in the presentation in my talk about where we're going in terms of discussing priorities with departments. I named Environment and Climate Change Canada as one of the key department, but all departments are being consulted to make sure that we have, we are working on collective priorities, and so of course we're looking at initiatives that will ensure, can we continue to benefit from space-based data. So in all its forms, this morning we heard the panelists talk about commercialization of space, so we have to take that into account as well in terms of how we deliver benefits from space to Canadians. So it's an ongoing discussion. So it's always looking at the best possible options in order to get benefits from Canadians. So that's my standing mandate, and I will continue to do that, not only in 1819, but ongoing.
Yeah, thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. I think we'll stop here with questions. I think we need to keep some questions for Sylvain's keynote tomorrow morning. So I want to ask you to join me in thanking the panel. And then I'll let Jeff, if you have some final.
So, thank you all. From my own standpoint as Executive Director of CASI, it's wonderful to have you here. Thank you very much for your support for the event. I have a question for everybody in this room. How many of you in this room are currently in school and have not yet graduated with a PhD? Stand up. How many? I think that's a fulsome number. And thank you for coming. Yeah. I'd just like to say you couldn't have made a better decision. That seems self-serving, but it's really not, because you can't do anything better than what you're doing right now for your career aspirations, to put a sharper point on where you want to go and to find out with whom you're going to set your course with. It's really, this room is full of rich possibilities, and it's wonderful that you're here to make the most of them. So that's a speech from the podium here. This afternoon, lunch goes until 2 o'clock. 2 o'clock sharp, everybody's back for a 1.5-hour technical session. It'll be our first breakout. That ends at 15:30. It resumes at 1600 until 1730, which for those of you who are not on a 24-hour clock is 5:30 in the afternoon. At that time, two things happen. First of all, the astronautics section of CASI, which is the, let's say, the structural element of the institute that organizes this event, we'll be having a meeting in the Piedboeuf Kent, which is the sort of double small rooms over here. I would invite all of you who would be interested to get more involved via CASI in the space arena, and also to help us organize Astro 2020, which is only 2 years from now. If you want to get involved more, we'd love to have you join us in that room, and we can already begin to put a little more structure into the astronautics section, which we're considering breaking into several different topical streams in order to better serve the industry. So please consider at 5:30, when the reception begins, I promise you we'll have lots of food left over when we're done. It doesn't have to be a long meeting, but it would be great for everybody who's interested to get together in that room. We'll take a list of the names of people who would like us to stay in touch and to see if we can work together to give more impetus. In response to Dale's comment about an Operation Bootstraps for the industry, maybe we have to ourselves lift ourselves up. Well, this is one way we can do it. And CASI is here to facilitate that kind of breaking through the inertia and getting into an upward movement that really begins to make a difference. And thank you also to our CSA colleagues for being here to share that adventure with us, and all of industry and academia. So it's all good. I think that is all I have to say. Thank you for your patience. See you later.